Welcome to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Breitman, and it's my pleasure to welcome in AJ Black, editor and publisher of the BC Eagle Insider, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, to talk Boston College ahead of this weekend's season opener against Rutgers. AJ, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So first, just wanted to ask you, year 3 entering for Jeff Hafley, head coach for Boston College, former Rutgers assistant, someone I'm really high on personally, and think was a tremendous hire for them. How has things gone so far? And I guess what is the general sentiment or hope of the fan base right now as he enters year 3?
Aaron, that's a great question because it's been kind of inconsistent, right? The first year was the COVID year, and it was hard to glean any from that, but it was still a 6-5 year, which, is not that far off from Steve Dazzy, but he played a mostly ACC schedule and played teams like Clemson, UNC, Pitt, played them all really well. That being said, you go to the next year with high expectations, and what happens in the second game of the season, Phil Dracovic, the star quarterback, gets hurt on a fluke play, and you have no quarterback to basically go behind that. So they go 6-6, kind of a disappointing year. There's a lot on the line this year for BC because this is the put up or shut up year for Hafley, because you have Dracovic back, you have Zay Flowers, and we'll talk about some of those other players in a moment. They need to have more than a 6-win season this year because BC doesn't get a very strong quarterback that often. The last one would have been Matt Ryan about 15 years ago. Can't blow the opportunity to have Phil Dracovic, lead your offense, and they need to prove it this year. And this is a big year for Jeff Hafley.
So I love the hire offensive coordinator John McNulty. Obviously, he had a lot of success at Rutgers under Greg Schiano in his first tenure. He coached Mike Teal, who I had on this week, who's the all-time passing leader at Rutgers. What was, I guess, the reception of him coming on board? He coming from Notre Dame, I believe, as a tight ends coach, but he obviously has a lot of history with quarterbacks. Is there hope that he's going to be able to take the offense and Dracovic also to the next level?
I think there is. Frank Cignetti, the former offensive coordinator, he's now at Pitt. And he was the guy that, Dracovic credits for getting into BC. So it was a little worrisome when he left. But it was clear at the end of the day that Hafley, after last year, was not happy with the preparation of his offensive staff. He cleans, there's a new offensive line coach, wide receivers coach, running backs coach, offensive coordinator, everything except the quarterbacks coach, who moved over from tight end so that McNulty can take that position. So Hafley comes across as a jovial guy, but he's a guy that is no phony baloney there. He will do what he needs to do. He's ruthless. He's got a streak of that. You don't see it when he's smiling on TV. McNulty, I'm very interested to see what he can do because Hafley continually alludes to there's going to be new wrinkles to this offense that we have. It's going to be specifically a pro style offense like we've had in the past, but you're going to see things that you haven't seen out of BC in a while. What that means, we don't know because practice has been closed. So it's been hard to glean what that's going to be. But, I like the pedigree of McNulty. I like his what he can bring in terms of his alignment, in terms of what Hafley's trying to do, controlling the clock, moving the ball both through the air and the off. But I also like, and this is McNulty himself, some college concepts because that's what Cignetti never wanted to do. He did not want to do any of those, RPO concepts, things that you don't see in the NFL, because it was, he was so late focused on being pro style. And I think McNulty's bringing that in with a quarterback like Dracovic, who did that in high school. I think there's some intriguing potential there that he has done so far for Boston College.
And, just going back to what you said before about, high expectations this season, I was surprised to see that, Boston College was picked just 6th in the Atlantic Coastal preseason poll. I know there's concern, I guess, around the conference about their offensive line having 5 new starters. What is your kind of take on that? Obviously, Boston College has a reputation for producing great offensive linemen year after year. How important is that development of that line? And is that kind of the biggest question mark for this team going into the year?
So it is definitely the biggest question mark. I can't get around that. There's major question marks about that offensive line. You put 5 new guys out there, that's going to be a problem. That being said, there's 3 guys that are going to start because Hafley didn't give any answers on who's going to start on the offensive line. He kind of did what Shiano did with the oars on everything.
Yeah.
We were waiting to see who he's going to pick. He just oared it all to death. So we don't know. But I think if you read the tea, I think 3 of the starters are going to be former 4-stars, which all 3 of them have had big. Kendall is the son of BC legend and NFL legend, not legend, but NFL star Pete Kendall. He's going to probably be the starting center. Ozzie Trapillo, his dad played in the NFL. He, I think, has the highest ceiling at offensive lineman. I've heard potentially first-round draft pick once he develops. So there's a lot of potential with this offensive line. And I've said on this on Locked On BC a bunch. This offensive line doesn't need to be great. It just needs to be serviceable. Because last year and the year before, that's all they were, and BC was okay. They weren't great. Zion Johnson was good, and Christian Mahogany was good. But if you look at the grades on the Pro Football Focus and some of the other guys, it was not good. So they got a new offensive coordinator who offensive line, Dave DeGuglielmo, who, Rutgers fans, if you're a Jets fan, I think he was a Jets offensive line coach. He was the Patriots offensive line coach. He's been everywhere. They call him Coach Googs. If you follow him on Twitter, if you want to go follow a funny BC coach, follow this dude. He is like an Italian stereotype up and down. He has his, what does he call them? Big dogs, his big dogs. Everything was a big dog. And he's kind of settled into the season, but I like this guy. I think he's the fit for a young offensive line. He's been around for 30 plus years at the college and pro level. He was at Louisiana last year. Last year's offensive line coach was not the best fit, Matt Applebaum, who's now with the Dolphins. And I like where they're at, but it still has to be a question mark. Until we see them play, you have to, it may not show against Rutgers, no offense to Rutgers, but when in about a month, having guys out there, that could be scary.
And obviously, Pat Garwo is back at running back. Yep. Did rush for over 1,000 yards last year. How much does that help kind of a maybe not a young line, but an inexperienced line, having a veteran back like that behind them?
So I'm really interested to see what Pat Garwo does this year. He ran for 1,000 yards last year because BC had no offense. They had a quarterback, Dennis Grosel, who might have been the quarterback that played against Rutgers in 2019. He was all right. He was a former walk-on under Adazio who played forever, and that's all they had for depth at quarterback. Last year, he struggled bad and just could not. So Pat Garwo was their only go-to guy. And he did well. And that was against stacked boxes and defenses saying, basically, go ahead, try to pass on us because we're not respecting that. This is going to be a different year for Garwo, but for 2 different reasons. On the negative side, the offensive line, we don't know, as we just said. We don't know what they're going to do. So that could be a concern. If you're a running back and you don't know where if they're going to their blocks correctly or whatever, that's a worry. On the other hand, he now has an offense, the passing offense, that could open up a lot for him because if defenses are going to dare you to pass, Phil Jacobic's going to torch them with Zay Flowers because Zay, if they're going to stack the box, is going to get 40 to 50 yards a catch. You can't do that. It's just not the right defensive alignment. So he's going to have there. It goes back to that offensive line. Can they hold those blocks and do the right thing? Because if they can, he may have a bigger season. I've done some projections. I think my personal projection, he'll have around 1,000, but Pat Garwo is a great kid and a great story.
So we've talked a lot about the offense. Tem Lukabu is your defensive coordinator. Obviously familiarity with Rutgers as well. And he's been in that role since Hafley's come on. How has he done in terms of the defense performing? And I guess what is the expectation for that unit this year?
So he's a hot young coordinator, and a big year from him, and he's going to be a name to watch in kind of the G5 coaching searches, because he has done a tremendous job with the defense in some areas. It just needs to be more complete. The secondary was the third in the country last year in terms of passing yards allowed. Excellent. They played out of their minds. They were excellent and did a nice job against some tough opponents. But that being said, their run defense was 92nd. Their sacks were 90. I think they were 90th or 91st in the country. Points allowed 30th. Depends on what stats you want to look at. BC has a good defense, but Loco is the name that continues to pop up. He has NFL and college experience. He was the linebackers coach with Cincinnati before he came to BC. I have the sense, just watching and seeing the depth pile up for BC on the defensive side of the ball, that this is a unit that could step up this year. And if they do, he could be popular name to see among MAC. If there's MAC programs that are looking for a new head coach, I think Tem Lokabu could be that guy.
So how much do you buy into the whole staff familiarity? Obviously, on both sides, mostly pretty much the whole BC staff has Schiano ties, Savon Huggins, even Stephen Shimko. A couple guys from Ohio State that were there, that Hafley brought over, that were there when Schiano was there. I had talked to Mike Teal about this with John McNulty, and just talking about, that if Schiano was running his defense that he ran back then, McNulty would have an advantage. Things are a little bit different now, and how they're running the defense. Defensive coordinator Joe Harizmiak came from Minnesota, so probably preparing for a lot of what they saw out of him last year there. But, is it an advantage? Does it add intrigue just to fans and media? Do you think it'll have any impact on this game, or is it really going to just really come down to execution?
Hafley has just said all along it's execution, and I kind of agree with him. I'm sure behind the scenes, there's nothing Hafley wants more. I'm sure he's talked at length about his respect for, Schiano and what they've been through together. But, there's going to be a little bit, I want to call it like sibling rivalry there, where he's going to want to one up the guy that he's worked with for years. But that being said, I think both coaches, Schiano and Hafley, they know you have to treat every game like it's just any other game. And when you talk to any good coach, whether it's Call Belichick and the pros, they say it to you that they're doing that. And the good coaches can do that. It's the coaches that struggle that times that get heated or blow things out of proportion because they're playing against a coach they hate or they've had a strong relationship with. So I see Schiano and Hafley as good coaches, right? They both have good potential, and they're both putting their programs in good positions. I see them both trying to put all the personal stuff and the stuff that they know aside, and maybe trying to pull a few things out the other teams aren't preparing for to possibly try to win this game.
So you bring up an interesting point. From the Rutgers perspective, this game is absolutely huge. Just in terms of building positive momentum. It's a young team, 70% sophomores and freshmen. If they have any chance of making a bowl, they have to win this game. Basically, it's unlikely they would win 4 Big Ten games this year. How is it looked at on the Boston College side? Is it because expectations are high, they're expected to win this game? Is it looked at as a momentum builder, or is it really just looked at as a game? Hey, Rutgers is on their schedule and they should beat them.
I think this is an exciting game. I think BC is looking at this, and they've said it, that they get to play a Big Ten team to start this season. How many times have, any school that, in college football that the power started off with Nicholls State or, Maine or whatever team Rutgers might play. I know it's a little different in the Big Ten with 3 out of conference games, but it's still the same point, right? You get 2 Power 5 programs out there. Both teams are going to be jacked and energized to win this. And they may not say it to the media. I go to these press conferences and I listen to, you could close your eyes and they say the same things about every team because they don't want to put anything out there for bulletin board material, right? Like, listening to Jeff Hafley on Tuesday say that every quarterback that Rutgers has is excellent. I mean, I'm not being disrespectful, but are they? you they and like it's hard to glean anything that's like legitimate from what they say because they don't want to put it out there. And so behind the scenes, my gut when I listen to these coaches talk, this is a big game. This is a big game for Schiano's staff. This is a big game for Hafley's staff. And the national media is so focused on some of the bigger teams, like obviously like games like Georgia and Oregon or Utah and Florida. Those are big games, and I get that. This is a fun under the radar game that could be a lot of fun to watch on Saturday.
I completely agree with you. I think also for, just old school fans, I mean, Northeast football, former Big East foes, obviously they do, kind of match up a little bit on the recruiting trail, all the staff intrigue. And you got to remember, Hafley learned a lot from Schiano. And so Rutgers fans, when you just said before that practices have been closed, that actually I wasn't aware of that. And Schiano actually this year practices are open to the media twice a week. But, there's been some fan frustration that, not a lot of information is coming out. When he didn't release the depth chart on Monday, there was some concern he wasn't going to do it. People are frustrated with the QB, battle, no information there. So, I love that you said that. I completely
we're the same way.
Yeah.
So let me clarify. It's not closed. He opens it for 25 minutes, but the first 15 minutes are stretchings. You can watch the players stretch for 15 minutes. And the same thing about the depth chart. Like we've heard the same, when fans were waiting and it wasn't coming out. And then all of a sudden it comes out and you don't get anything from it,
Yep. So he opens for the beginning of practice and then you have to leave.
You have to leave, yeah. So it's a fun thing for the media that you have to wait. You have to wait around on BC for 2 hours. Well,
that's pretty funny. So Schiano actually does it the opposite. You get to go in for the last 25 minutes, and then you can talk to either him or the players after.
That would make the most sense, and I don't blame Hafley for this. I think it's more of a BC thing because Adazio did the same thing. So,
that's interesting. So what's your overall, I know we've talked about expectations a little bit, but what is your kind of projection for BC in 2022?
Okay, so I have not endeared myself to Rutgers fans on my podcast, and that's okay. I go back and listen to myself, and I don't think I was that unrealistic, but that's okay. I put BC at 8-4. I'm expecting a good season from BC for a number of reasons, because I think the defense had some things there last year, and there's some other key components that will add to that to make the defense better. I think, and I said this before, that the offensive line will be serviceable. And if that's all you get, you have one of the only teams in the country that returns a 3,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard receiver, and a 1,000-yard rusher throughout their career, with Djokovic, Zay Flowers, and Pat Garwo. So I expect BC to win some games that they are expected to win, but I have circled some games as well that I think that BC has the potential to pull some upsets this year. And if Hafley is aggressive, which he was in 2020 when they had some good teams, he tried to pull some stuff against like UNC and it helped him win against Pitt, that put them against some up over some better teams. I think they could win some games. The game that I've circled and I've rationalized it in my brain a bunch of times is this game against Clemson. I know Clemson's defense is disgusting. They don't have any there. I am not sold on their quarterback at all. And BC has lost by 6 points to Clemson twice in the longer half. Both of those games were in Death Valley. They get them at this year with Djokovic back. And I don't know if Rutgers fans know the story, being near New York, you might, with the red bandana game, where they wear the red bandana mask, bandana for Wells Crowther, who was a 9/11 hero. That game has special meaning to BC, and it always brings out a lot out of them. I think BC could be a potential really big trap game for Clemson. So I sit at 8-4 because they're also going to have a what we call in the BC world a WTF loss where it happens all the time. But 8-4 to me sounds like what my optimistic view of Boston College will be this year.
You mentioned one thing I did forget to ask you on Dracovic is what are the reports on him in terms of he had that season-ending hand injury last year? Is he fully recovered at this point?
He is. Yep, he's good to go. The hand injury should have taken him, until December, and that's why against Wake Forest and some of those end of the year games he looks like his arm strength and hand strength are completely 100% right now, and he's playing for a first round draft pick right now, and I think for an early draft pick against a interesting quarterback crew, but I think he should be good to go.
So last question for you. What are the keys for you in this game for Boston College to come out victorious? And if Rutgers does win this game, what ultimately, will they need to do to beat BC?
Sure. I'll start with what Rutgers needs to do to win this game. And that's to keep BC's offense off the field. Get those third downs. Force BC to make stupid errors. One thing about Hafley that I've noticed, and he did it a little less last year, but I still think it could be something that pops its ugly head. He makes mistakes a lot. That could be penalties, personal fouls, turnovers. It pops up a way for Rutgers to win this game. For BC, their keys to win, they really need to get their offense going. Protect Dracovic, let him throw the ball, just keep the ball moving because, and again, this is not a knock at Rutgers. I love Rutgers secondary. I think it's very good. If BC's offense can go, I just don't see enough firepower on Rutgers to answer that. So if BC's offense can move the ball, they should win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's fair. I think, Rutgers needs it to be kind of a little bit of a slugfest. They can't get behind too much early, or I think you're right. It's going to be tough for them to catch up. I think momentum obviously is huge. If BC gets rolling early with that offense, it's going to be tough to catch up, I think. So AJ Black, BC Eagle Insider. Also, I did forget to mention host of the BC Locked On podcast. Appreciate your time. And thanks for putting up with Rutgers fans this week. This is I don't know if this is actually, I should ask you this, the BC fans, how important this game is from a kind of just, not a rivalry anymore, obviously. And obviously BC has a, big upper hand all time. But this was always this was a game that Rutgers fans always circled on their calendar. And, we're pretty pumped about having this game against BC again.
So it's totally off topic, and I apologize for making your podcast go on. With the conference realignment, I've said this on our podcast a bunch. My golden vision of where this all ends is that the Big Ten expands and that the old Big East is absorbed. So you get Syracuse, Pitt, West Virginia, BC, Rutgers, and that they do quadrants. And then we get Rutgers, BC, Syracuse, all those old Big East teams playing more often. Because I think that would be fun. I kind of miss the regional rivalries. I was at BC the year they moved to the ACC, but I've had season tickets when they were in the Big East and played Rutgers every year. And I love seeing the ACC opponents, but I do miss the Big East. There's something to be said about the regional stuff that's missing right now.
I agree with you. I agree. And, we're happy as Rutgers fans because, we had Syracuse last year. We have BC this year. We have you guys in, a few more years again. And then we have Virginia Tech now coming up next year. So a little bit of a Big East reunion on the non-conference side for Rutgers. AJ Black, thank you so much. Appreciate all your time. If there's anything else you want to plug, please do.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at AJ Locked On BC, also on Twitter or on YouTube, and you can join the dozens of Rutgers fans that are flooding my comment section, telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. I love all the Rutgers fans that are doing it, but I'm sad to say before I go ahead, I am so surprised. I have said things about programs before, other than ECU, who have a very angry fan base. Rutgers has been one of the most boisterous fan bases, and that's a respect to you guys. I think it's whenever I say something that's not right, you guys call me on it, and you're out there looking for the stuff, and it's been a fun prep week for this game.
Well, thanks for saying that. And yeah, it's an enthusiastic fan base looking for respect. It's been a long haul joining the Big Ten, and we feel like things are going in the right direction now with Shiano back, and absolutely huge season opener. I hate the overreactions to week one, win or lose, but I feel like in this case, that the hype is warranted. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll see what happens on Saturday.
All right. Thanks, Aaron, for having me on anytime.